Hey everybody, it has been a while, but we are excited to be back with our usual fun and frolicsome crew. We've got Ellen Lampergreo here joining us from the tropics on St. Bart, and of course we've got the evil cackling Ian Grieve, who understands the intersections of all things. And I am your other host here, Bob Bonial. Welcome to Zone 1, where we talk about technology, art, culture, philosophy, really whatever is crossing our desks and running around in front of our eyeballs this week. Sorry we've been gone for a while. We are glad to be back. And this week is going to be an episode where we do a little bit of catching up and we have a look at what's hot at the moment.
Speaking of hot, I think you should tell us a little bit about your hot show in Vegas with Christina Aguilera in that hot new space called Voltaire. What's going on there?
Well, Voltaire is a really interesting space. Like, look, anytime that we get an opportunity to work on a Vegas residency, it's fun. You can usually count on doing something really spectacular or, of scale, right? Like when we think about Adele at Resort World, or we think about some of these other residencies, it's really about this huge scale in Vegas and doing things at an unprecedented size. Certainly U2 at Sphere is kind of like the supersized version of that. Here's what was amazing about working with Christina, Rock Nation, and that gang on this residency. It was about this venue. The Venetian has this venue called Voltaire, which they've just built up. Oddly enough, it was a room I had been in before. We had done Blue Man Group in this room before, and it was a very different room at that point. And then what the Venetian did was they closed that theater and they made a decision that they wanted to create a venue that was about intimacy. That was about bringing the performers ultra close to the audiences and, ultimately making a show where nobody in the room was more than 50 feet away from the star. So they restyled the room, they demolished it, they brought in Derek McLean to design the new space, which is styled much more as a sort of old school Vegas concert club. So picture the old banquettes, tables, high-end bottle service, right? So it's like, if you look at those old pictures of the Rat Pack at the Riviera, or at the Tropicana, and these old school showrooms, it's like that kind of showroom. It's really small. It's a beautiful proscenium theater.
It's interesting because for anyone who doesn't know, Derek McLean is an award-winning Broadway scenic designer who has done a lot television along the way. And I think it's really interesting that Vegas is tapping into people like that. Scenic design as architecture and scenic design as, sort of crossover from Broadway to the concert world.
Well, and that's worth talking about, because they're crossover. What a great word, right? And this idea of sort of like another thing that we've been talking a lot about lately is digital placemaking, which we referred to on this show before. But this idea that events can happen both physically and digitally, and that things can be a hybrid. And that things can show up, in a camera feed, but also as a live experience, and maybe also as a web-based piece of entertainment, and certainly with Christina, this hybrid philosophy was the core of everything. We made so much of that show for camera, right? Because Christina told us in the very beginning, she's like, look, it's very important to me that this show looks good on Instagram. Right. Just from a marketing standpoint, that's how most people get, because awareness of the show grows that way. And Christina has a very robust social media campaign and a robust digital presence in any case. And that informed so much of how we dealt with that show. We built so much of the content of that show in Unreal Engine, which we had already used to do the concept development and the pre-vising for it. And then that translated directly into content that we use for the show. The show leaned very much into a virtual scenic extension where we were creating worlds with Unreal and then displaying them on the LED screens in the back, and really working to like you, which Ellen and Ian, you both know that I love to trick audiences into
Right.
really understanding what they're looking at and where the border lines and the dimensions of things begin and end, which Christina embraced that wholeheartedly. She really, you know, that room is based on this kind of French principle of belle de nuit, the beauty of the night. And indeed, there is a resident show in there called Belle de Nuit,
Right.
which is a very wonderful old school Vegas variety show, but contained in a wrapper that is ultra contemporary and almost sci-fi-ish. Meets
And do the
noir.
headliners fit into that somehow?
Hmm?
The headliners fit into that somehow.
Well, they do, because Kylie Minogue has also got a residency in the room. We're now the second residency in the room. I know that Voltaire is moving to add other residencies to the rotation, but each of those residencies slots into what Belle de Nuit, the resident show, is doing. So the audience, they get to come, they get seated, they see Belle de Nuit as kind of the first act.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's an intermission, and then this is another thing that's a little different from other Vegas residencies. We go on at 11 o'clock. It's a late night show,
Mm-hmm.
which allows us, you know, allows us in many different ways, like semantically and in terms of time, to be a little edgier, right? So we go up at 11. Kylie, the same thing. Kylie Minogue show goes up at 11. But yeah, we did try to achieve a consistency of aesthetic. You know, the idea of the room is like they want to make this room like Vegas's version of Studio 54 in a way, but ultra contemporary and with this little bit of French aesthetic on top. So, but again, like they're really technologically, the room is incredibly advanced. And from a programming sense, they're trying to create shows that have these sort of digital aspects combined with real aspects, which we call digital placemaking. Christina has certain merchandise items that are what I would call phygital, right? Which are both digital and physical objects. You can collectible items plus a t-shirt or a bag or a thing. And that this is the phygital approach.
Didn't you come up with that expression like a couple of years ago, Bob? I seem to remember you invented that.
I don't think I invented phygital.
I think you did. I think you did.
Well, I was certainly one of the people that was talking about it early on, especially like when a lot of people, Ian, were talking about the metaverse and NFTs and things like that, which was basically just articulating this intersection of digital and real.
Why does that seem like such a long time ago now? I mean, seriously, right? Nobody talks about VR or the metaverse anymore. Nobody talks about NFTs or crypto even anymore, except for Bitcoin, because now it's been brought overland and legitimized by the big finance companies, right? But it's interesting to me how fast this is all moving, right? You're talking about like Christina and the residency and the stuff you were working on there. I like the fact that the size and scale has been brought down, right? When I go see a concert, I've been to, you know how much I love concerts and music, and you know how many different types of music I like, Bob. But when I go to a concert, if I go to a 200, 300 people venue that's small and you're pushed up against the stage and it's tight, I love it. I enjoy it more. I enjoy the music. I enjoy the performance, like the whole thing, right? I've been to see U2 at Enormo Domes, right? And I've been to Wembley. I saw Madonna on Blonde Ambition at Wembley Stadium, right? And she was fantastic, right? I saw Rihanna at Old Trafford in the UK. I took my daughter. And so they were just massive, right? 35, 40,000, 50,000 people, right? And it's so impersonal. It's just like you're standing in a field watching a performance on a TV, right? Because all you're doing is looking at the video screens, right? You can't see the artist, right? You actually watch a video of the artist who's performing live in the same place as you. And I just think that disconnection, it's fun with the people you're with, but it doesn't help with the connection with the artist. So going to a smaller scale like that, I think is really interesting. I think that's it's personalizing the experience. And I think that's why it links into the future of entertainment and the digital realm that we're talking about and where we're moving, because it's all become about personalizing the experience, right? If you were to broadcast that show in 360, you would mount you would mount cameras on poles close in where those tables are, and your eye line view would be in level with the stage, but you could see it in full 360, but you would have a very close-up view of the artist, and the artist can't hide, don't forget, right? That is a show for very talented artists, right? The ones who are using, you know, voice changing technology and pitch matching and like a lot of playback stuff, you know, them being slightly off will show. If they're miming anything, if anything's like piped in, it will show. You will see it. So I think that also is an issue for that kind of entertainment. You need a Christina Aguilera, a Kylie Minogue. You need a U2. People who are on point, really good, very talented, and actually deliver what they say they will deliver. They don't need enhanced stuff, right? And I think, ironically, the nature of digital technology is actually stripping back the layers that have been put in over the years. So if you've gone further back from the entertainment, they can put more in. But if you get close up to the entertainment, which is where digital is taking us, the raw assets and the raw material have to be of a very high quality because you see everything, right?
You know, it's interesting you say that because in our lifetime, things have changed so drastically. It used to be if you wanted to see a live event, you had to go to it. There was no other way to see it. Broadway shows came and went, concerts came and went. You had to go. You had to be at the event. Then we got into what Bob just did with Billy Joel, televising a live event, but changing the lighting. Like, you know, one time I went to a concert and one of the big lighting designers was there for television and said, oh, don't tell the concert lighting designer you came tonight because you're not going to see his lighting. You're going to see my relighting for television because the camera doesn't see what he wanted the live audience to see. So then there was, okay, you had to go to the event. Then you could watch the event on television, which I think the Billy Joel one's coming up next week, right?
Sunday.
Sunday night.
Sunday,
so we'll
April
talk about
14th.
that.
Yeah.
We'll talk about that in a minute. And then now you can't, Christina, like Ian just said, she can't finish singing a song before it's not on the internet. It's there the second it's over. So designing for TikTok, designing for Instagram, making sure it's like what the television people were doing in that truck, fine tuning everything that was, you know, in the broadcast truck. You have to do now so that the live audience sees it and the television audience sees it fabulously at the same time. Because if it looks bad on Instagram, you're going to get slammed.
Well, and I think, look, that like that's just the first peeled layer too. Like, you know, like I know, for instance, that like if we consider U2 at Sphere, you know, you had 40 shows. If you didn't see that show at Sphere, it would seem that you've missed out. But I don't think you have, because in the last week they were there, they did a massive multicam shoot, right? And now they're moving forward. They're going to release that, which, by the way, I think is part of what ultimately could help Sphere to become profitable and sustainable, because it's a very, very difficult venue and process. I mean, just having a venue that's so technically advanced like that, it brings with it hard costs and process considerations that are difficult, right? But the moment that you can say, oh, but wait a minute, we can expand the audience so far beyond the 17,000 people in this room. Like, in the conventional way to think about that is, oh, well, a concert film, right? But the way that content is created for Sphere, and the way that they actually, their process works to create content, which involves a very robust sort of VR approach, because otherwise how do you know, creators to visualize what you're doing in that space, unless you're in the space, it becomes difficult. So one of the things Sphere does in working with their artists, and, you know, Willie referred to this in talking about how U2 happened, is that they put on the goggles and now they can be in the space. Well, now take that, right? Take this idea that you could be in the space in your Oculus or in your Apple Vision Pro or in your, you know, pick your VR apparatus, right? You could be anywhere in the space and see that show any way you wanted it. But now add the digital information that's been captured by the multicam shoot, right? So now you have super high fidelity detail wherever you go. If you want to be on stage with Bono, you could be on stage with Bono. You want to be up in the balcony to get that huge, big, immersive shot, you can be there. You want to be like in the sky, in the content, looking down, you can be there. That's kind of like, and we're seeing more artists playing with this idea. And that also translates to a venue like Voltaire, right? Where you could have that intimate experience. But as I love this terminology Apple's come up with, spatial computing, which I think that there's a certain toxicity that's now been attached to the metaverse, or been like, people are like, oh God, the metaverse, because people have been talking about it too long, right? But the fact of the matter is this: shared spaces with audiences and performance, or with events, are clearly moving to a place where, from a distribution standpoint and an experience standpoint, yes, you can be in the room, but yes, you're also going to be able to have these amazingly rich, highly, Ian, as you're talking about, personalized experiences where you can go see U2 at the Sphere and sit anywhere and have and look from any angle and be in the show, as it were. Which is one reason, like, if you look at what Tomorrowland is doing with their festival, wildly successful, amazing gargantuan production values. If you go to Belgium to see Tomorrowland, it's an astonishing experience. But during the pandemic, when they couldn't do it live, they spun up an amazing version of the show that they built an Unreal Engine, and they also used Depends, which is another piece of software that allows you to, create these sort of virtual representations of things. And they had the festival in a virtual world with these big, beautiful virtual stages. And this was the thing: you could be anywhere in the venue you wanted, and you could experience the shows in that way. Well, one of the things that's happened since the pandemic has been over is that Tomorrowland did not stop doing that. Like, they still offer the virtual right alongside the real. And that's because, A, they know they can bring a global audience to it, and that increases revenue and increases reach. But there's actually people who prefer that version of it. Because then they can get in with a tight little group of their friends. They don't have to worry about where their tickets are for, or dealing with getting through the crowd or whatever. Like, they can enjoy that however they want to enjoy it, in a very personalized way, and even be adding their own kind of production elements to it. And I think that that's kind of the future. It's one of the things that is the future of experiencing entertainment. Because people talk about, and we've talked about on this podcast, like, how ticket prices have gone through the roof, and the accessibility question to experiences and shows. And I think this is a way that there's going to be a continued accessibility for you to be able to, witness and be part of, like, a Taylor Swift show, but not have to find the $5,000 to be able to sit in the stadium.
Whatever happened to that idea, like, of Travis Scott, like, parachuting someone into the Fortnite arena where it's live and digital at the same time?
I think Fortnite's still doing that. And if you look at Epic's strategy around Unreal, they're still very much leaning into that. They've spun up a whole version of Unreal, which is kind of a more Fortnite-based building version of that software. There's also a version of Unreal for the architects. It's called Twinmotion, which kind of makes Unreal work really well for visualizing and concept development of architectural spaces. But Unreal has also spun up this version, which is basically a Fortnite construction set. And they made that both for people to create versions of the Fortnite game that are personalized, but they also specifically made it so that brands and artists can have events and activations in the Fortnite, genre and world, if you will, and be able to do that. And I mean, that's continued. There's, it's actually gotten so accessible to do that now that it maybe it's been a little less newsworthy that some artists have been doing it, but there's been a parade of people who have been creating activations and events specifically in Fortnite and doing that. And that's because, for Gen Z, Fortnite is not just a game. It's like, it's a place to get together. It's a social zone. It's like and that's why I think there's this misunderstanding of what a social network has to be or what shape it has to take. You know, and
I tell you what, Bob, it's interesting for me that's a new concept, right? Because what we're talking about is the modding community from like Half-Life and Team Fortress, right? But just updated a little bit for the newer technology, and it really is. It's legitimizing the old mod community, because you and I will remember that, right? There used to be so many mod communities, and they'd take Ellen, you might not know what this is, right? But if you had like first person shooters, they became very popular. It really started with Doom, but like when we got to Half-Life, that's when it got really exciting, right? And it was an immersive environment in a research center that just everything went out of control and aliens were coming in from another dimension. But what you could do was you could take the engine of the whole thing and change the graphics and change the characters and then publish that. And it's like, it's using the same engine and everything, but it was like non-commercial. They had mod communities that produced mods where, you know, you could fight each other on Mars, or you could explore underground caverns, or there'd be a Dungeons and Dragons. There was so many different types, right? And they were coming all the time. And that was a whole thing, but it was all done for free, right? You bought the original game, you used the engine, and then you played the mod, right? And everybody used to play the mod. And that's exactly what we're talking about now, but in a digital realm with newer technology, with Web3, you know, AI, you know, all these things wrapped in together. But it is an old concept. It's a concept from like, what, 20, 30 years ago now? I mean, we're getting on a bit, right? I mean, it's
why Unreal exists, right, Ian?
Right.
Yeah.
Unreal as a game engine began because people were modding Quake.
That's right.
Right.
Yes, of course.
Right.
Quake,
And that collection of tools to mod Quake, like the Unreal Engine began as the Quake engine, right? But then modders started working with the engine and adding functionality so that they could mod Quake.
Yeah, the two
and
Johns.
then that's how this tool sprang
old friends of mine, John Romero and John Carmack, right?
Yeah.
And Carmack,
you know, it's
went
interesting
on to
too,
part
because
of
Bob,
Meta.
talk about social gathering places. I remember Bob about 10 years ago, or maybe not 10, but a while back, definitely pre-pandemic when we were all online, saying that his child had a lot of friends that he never met. And it was all in this digital, you know, social online world. And that's where a lot of his social interaction took place. And I think that may be true for a lot of people. And it might be like, you know, we've never really looked into it, but like, so, you know, like, suppose you had like fishes going into Sphere next. And I do think that one of our future guests should be Abby Rosen-Holmes, who's doing the content creation for that. I mean, she's like amazing. And I think there's 4 different shows going in, and that's going to be like a big thing. So suppose there's like some fish online digital community that develops around this. And it's another way for like you two or Fish or Ian's Worlds, whoever, what you're creating, to bring in all these people, and like you belong to Fish, or you belong to, you know, like some, you know, I'm sitting home alone and I don't know what to do, and I don't want to go to a movie and there's nothing on Netflix. I'm going to go to my Fish World and see who's there tonight. You know, it's better than the old chat room on the dial-ups.
Well, and I think, look, it speaks to like a philosophy about this, which is, I think that Meta has had, you mentioned Meta, Ian, and Cormac went to Meta, and like Meta made a mistake, I think, right? And it's the classic kind of Field of Dreams quotation here. They built it and nobody came, right? And that's because you can't just build the venue. These things, creating community and community locus and community engagement, is about giving the community a reason to exist, not a place to exist, a reason to exist.
No, I think we need to rephrase it. I think we need to say, build the right thing and they will come.
Exactly.
Right.
Well, didn't that used to be the same thing as like, you know, what was it? Run the flag up the flagpole and see if anybody salutes. I mean, it's the same thing.
Are we having that? Are we having meeting aphorisms now? Is that what we're doing?
Right. No. But yeah, no, but you're right. Build the right thing and people will definitely come.
You know what?
Meta has struggled because they didn't start with programming. They started with a place.
Right.
Fortnite has succeeded so well because they just started immediately with programming, the programming of the game. And then they were like, oh, wait a minute, we could have a Travis Scott show in here or a Katy Perry show in
I'll
here,
tell you,
which
I'll tell you
again
what
was not
I'll tell
about
you
the
what,
place, it was about the programming,
well, I'll
right?
tell you what the problem is, right? And Ellen raised with that old like meat speak from like the 90s, right? The problem is everybody wanted to think outside the box. Now everybody's outside the box and nobody's in the box. That's the,
Right.
that's the problem, right? That's the problem. And a lot of these
Well,
things, a lot of these concepts, they're coming back in the box if you think
no,
about
you're
it, right? You know,
absolutely right. But the
it's coming
box
full
has to be
circle.
more interesting.
Well, the
You're
box is more
absolutely
interesting.
right, but the box
The
has to be more
toys now,
interesting.
right? Right,
Right.
Bob? The box has more toys, right?
A
You got
lot.
more toys to play with, right?
Yeah, and now the box has gotten really hazy too, right? Because the tools are sort of erasing the structure of the box, and being in or out of the box is you know, that borderline is ambiguous. But the concept you're talking about, this idea of being, you know, in the box, you know, now every box can become your box, right?
Right,
And personalized. And especially as we see AI leaking into this, like, yes, I could go to my fish world, Ellen, and I might elect to experience that sphere show exactly as you know, exactly as Chris Karuta and Abby and Giffen have crafted it, right? But very shortly, probably not with this iteration, but shortly, we're going to get to a point where, because of the integration of AI, I could say, no, I don't want the Abby Rosenholmes content. I want my content. I want what I think a fish show could look like. And I'm going to be able to prompt my, you know, my AI to be making, you know, making that show have a content and an atmosphere and a feeling that best suits me, you know, that I would like to see fish performing.
Is that legal?
Yeah.
Cool.
Well, I mean,
yeah,
it's all going to depend on rights holders and how much flexibility like artists allow. But
hold
yeah,
on. You can fix that though, because if it's all assets that are provided as part of the system, so your ticket gets you core performance, a basic thing, and a bunch of stuff, right? If all these assets and these opportunities, you can add them in, but they're already available to you. It's like when you go to Yogurt Beach, right? And you get your yogurt and it's in the thing, and then there's that whole area where you can put, nuts
The
in there,
toppings.
chocolate, yeah. And so that's the way it would be, right? The toppings will all be there. You've paid for like whatever you want, but you'll just be able to mix
That's
it.
definitely one concept. I think Bob was even talking about doing your own, like, forget their toppings, bring in your own toppings.
yeah, and I
Well,
think that's going to be true of network broadcast. I think it's going to be true of movies. Like, you're going to start to have this opportunity to personalize big pieces of IP. And the degree to which you will be able to personalize will be up to the rights holders of the people broadcasting that IP, generally speaking. You know, although we know there's always going to be a robust community of people who break those things, you know, and go off and then do whatever they want with them. And you know, the whole legal, that concept of legal, I think, grows more ambiguous by the moment, you know, in terms of
I think that's an interesting point, though, right? If you try and apply statutory legal constraints to a virtual digital world, now you're in a real quandary, aren't you? Because the virtual digital world only exists in a small amount of RAM on a computer, right? It's not real; it's virtual. So, what's legal and what's
right.
not
But
legal?
if Abby Rosenholmes has, right, but if Abby Rosenholmes or whoever it is, Fish themselves or Madison Square Garden owns the copyright to that show, and you then totally redesign it in an AI format and release it, then what?
the release word
bit, right? If you're making money off it, fair enough. But if you're not, and it's for your own entertainment, how is that in any way infringing anything, right?
Right.
Oh, by the way, for the viewing and listening audience, none of us are attorneys, and you should absolutely
right.
on any of us to be talking.
You absolutely should take legal and financial advice from Bob O'Neill at every opportunity you get. It would be a great idea.
Right.
You know, but it is a great point, Ian, and it's a point I think the IP holders are wrestling with, because there's revenue to be found in allowing the audience some autonomy in this, right?
I think a level of that is coming from what's emerging, right? You know, like you were talking about, like the metaverse is getting tired, virtual reality, people are over it, they're kind of like, it wasn't what they think it would be. It's like changing so much, but it's not, it's diversified so much, right? It's so wide spectrum. But the thing that's so hot now, right, which is really interesting for me, is AI, right? You like every day there's a new AI release.
Right.
Every day there's a new large language model release. Every day there's a new automation and agentification system. It's like such an overload, right? But I think that the content creation world has realized, okay, we're trying to stem it. Writers are striking over it. We want to stop it. We want to push back the tide. But I think they're starting to see, you can't stop this, right? This is whether you like it or not, the future's coming, right? It doesn't matter, right? You can ignore it, you can hide from it, you can look away, you can try and do everything you can, but nobody can turn back that tide, right? Nobody, right?
Right.
And the level of intensity and just sheer magnificence, to be honest with you, just structural intelligence of the AI products that are coming is phenomenal, right? I try to drink from the fire hydrant as much as I can. I've been around this right from the beginning. Bob will tell you, like, it's my passion, right? But the stuff that's coming and the potential from the AI stuff, oh my goodness, it's so incredible, right? And
No, you're absolutely right. And
everything
you
else
see
seems to have faded backwards now.
Right. You see a huge difference between people like the Bob Bonials of the world who embrace everything that comes out as a possible tool in his toolkit, as opposed to people you see arguing about it online about this is going to replace us and I don't want to use it and this is terrible and the union has to fight against it and this should not be allowed in film production. And, those people are going to get left behind.
Well, they clearly are. I can't readily think of any technological advancement that has been stopped by humanity as a period, right? But especially especially based around the points of like, it's going to displace human vocations. Like, nobody stopped any part of the Industrial Revolution, because it was going to change how people were employed. There used to be 500,000 people on the planet who made lace. Now,
right.
5. It's like it's just
and horseshoes, and as Pat McKay always says, buggy whips. But now the last buggy whip manufacturer does very well because there's no competition. But I will say that translation, there are some AI translation tools from any language to any language, and they are 99% correct. There are some bugs they can't work out, like the French le and la for masculine and feminine. So a house has her roof, and you have to go in and fix it back to the roof because we don't say that in English. But
the only people who know the rules on that are French people, right? Everyone else of us who's learned French, I still struggle with that, right?
No, but I'm talking about if you put in translation and the French version says une maison et sa toiture, you're going to get in English the house and her roof. So then you have to go back and get out the her, but it's minor and it really is there are some great AI translation tools.
Well, but with adaptive AI, it will fix that itself, right? It won't take a programmer, right? It will find it, it will recognize it, it will see the errors, and it will fix itself. And that's the whole point of adaptive AI.
Absolutely.
Not
eventually.
even
Someone has to train it to do that.
Ellen, I've been in the technology industry from like the get-go, right? I used to automate chemical plants. That's what I started out doing, right? Writing process control systems. And the level of evolution of what is happening on not even a weekly basis, a daily basis now, is mind-blowing even for me, right? The speed of this thing, right? That whole, it's going to be 10 times faster. Web 1 to Web 2, it took a long period of time, right? It took, for it to double its ability, right? From Web 2 to Web 3, it took a third of that time, right? A third of that time to evolve again to a new level. But this now, the Web 3 realm that we are still nascent, right? It's still nascent, but not for long. It's 10 times faster than anything before. And like before we started recording, we were talking about, it's like, well, nobody even talks about that anymore, right? And that used to be the hot topic, 12 months ago, right? It used to be everything. This is everything, right? And it's just the landscape changing so quickly and evolving so quickly, right? That I think people's estimation of like, oh, well, eventually this will happen, or eventually, no, it's now, right? With the evolution of artificial intelligence and the agentification, and that's the thing that I wanted to bring up, which you'll hear about it a lot. Like this is what's next, right? So they had these large language models, and it went out and it read all the content of human history and every book and every article on the web, and then put it all back together in a big giant network. So for want of a better expression, it was Google on steroids, right? It was just Google with much more information and a much faster processing speed, right? But now there are the chip manufacturers have got to a stage where they've evolved the amount of processing power that can be applied to it. So its evolution is not going up by like 2, 3, 4. It's not like a linear increment, right? It's exponential. And we're reaching that point on the graph where it just goes vertical, right? It's so quick. But instead of going with large language models with these 18 gigabytes of data and you've got to surf through it and you've got to console it and it takes us no, what they've done is they've found a way to use the AI to get the specialist parts and put them into specialist areas and then write agents to work on those special areas. So now it's a pyramid of different agents or modules or subprograms, if you like, working with each other's. And this agentification, they took to ChatGPT 3.5 and they run it through an agentification process for a specific industry. I think it was a manufacturing industry to eliminate inefficiencies, right? And they realized that the responses they were getting were the performance levels of the projection of GPT-5 from a GPT 3.5 data set. So they didn't have to update the data set and change the dates and put anything. They didn't have to do that, right? Just by simply using these agents, it made it so much more powerful and so much faster. And I think that's what's hitting the accelerator now, right? The speed of change is going so quick now. And you'll hear a lot about it. You watch and you look out for it, right? You'll hear about agentification and AI agents. That's what's coming next. And I think that is the real tipping point. I think that's the real game changer for sure, right?
Yeah, we've been training agents here, mainly to help us work on strategic underpinnings to brand activations. We can train an agent that becomes fairly expert in a brand and a market vertical and the way that brand communicates, and also has been trained on the principles of, experiential ROI and, all of the things that we think about as an agency. And so now we have this resource. And by the way, in as much as people are saying, oh, but isn't that going to put strategists out of a job, or isn't generative AI going to put artists out of a job? The only thing that our business has been doing since we've started deploying AI is expanding. We have hired more people since we started using AI than we have in the history of the company. Right. And we've been taking those people and putting them on more projects than we have in the history of the company. I don't see it. I don't see this massive, I don't see the lights getting turned off in all of these vocations. Instead, I'm seeing people, as you've, Ian, talked about, and Ellen, you just thank you for the kind words, by the way, saying that I get out there in front of things and put them to use. But what we're seeing is people who are really great at stuff are taking AI, incorporating into their tool set, and having an even greater capacity and a greater capability and doing more work and bringing more people into the process. I'm seeing abundance spilling out of AI rather than this sort of dystopian view that, oh, well, it's going to put us all, it can't put us all out of business, because even if we say that it is under the control of corporate greed, they have to get the money from somewhere. That's from us, right? It's from the masses.
Right,
If you're a cultural company like Disney or like CBS or like, Viacom or any of these big media companies or big platform companies, you need people to be living productive, prosperous lives to engage and be directing revenue. So it's like, yeah, I've yet to see it. I've yet to see any real evidence that any particular vocations are just being utterly demolished and cleared out. What I'm seeing is vocations are changing.
There you go. Yeah, it's transition and change, adaptability, right?
Yep.
But then, this is not a new concept, right? You had the original people who used to dig fields by hand and plant their crops by hand. And then you had a guy who's like, well, hang on, I can put this metal blade here and hook it up to a horse and I can work 10 times faster, right? So then they were using the plow, but the guys who used the plow were superseded by the guys who used the tractor, because the tractor can do 10 times the amount that a plow can do. But you still had the people going, well, it's going to put all the plow workers out of employment, and plow workers will have nothing, they'll be destitute. Well, it's like, okay, if the tractor's the next thing, learn to use a tractor, and then you get people, I can't use a tractor, I can only use a plow. And so it's like, well, okay, you're going to get left behind, but you deserve to get left behind, sorry. And I think that analogy, you can extend that forward now to where we are now. I think it's just a cultural and an execution shift, right? The difference is that super creative people with AI now have more tools to bring that creativity to life, to bring that vision to life. You can do it faster, you can do it better, and you don't have to guide a whole bunch of other stuff to try and get something close to what you wanted. You can actually get what you wanted and what you saw quickly and responsively. But however, for a creative person, it didn't exist before. If a team of 20 people in a room was sitting there waiting for an idea to germinate and then work on it, okay, brilliant, like the old writer's room, right? But you don't, that's not what drove that in the first place. It still needed that super creative person to say, hey, this is what I want to make and this is how I want to make it. And I think the tools being provided to the people allows them to be more creative. And I think some people will be better off with this technology, and it will surprise them, right? Because once they learn that it's friendly and useful, and by the way, as we go forward, technology gets easier to use, not more difficult, not more complex, right? You know, smartphones is a great example, right? And it's like, well, it's got a touch screen and it has everything on it and it says everything. You don't have to press a button 455 times to send a 2-line text to someone. You can just do it, or you can speak into it, right? And people are like, oh shit, this is really good, right? So I think that the fear is that the complexity level of the technology that's available seems to be overwhelming when you look below it, but it's actually, the user interface is made easier to use. It's made more accessible. And I think the level of creativity and the output of creativity and the content generation is going to proliferate from this point forward, not actually get smaller or be overtaken by robots, right? Because, you know, ask any AI art creation system to generate a person and then look at their hand, and you can instantly tell that it was AI generated because it's got like deformed fingers or not enough fingers. It seems to struggle with fingers for some reason. But, you know, the point is you can get close to what you had in your mind and you can bring that out very quickly, very easily. It doesn't change the fact that you still need creative people. It just creates more space for more creative people, right?
What a great way to wrap up, too, because I know that we're out of time. As unbelievable as that seems, we've just barely gotten together, and we've already run out the clock.
I got lots to say. You cut me off, man.
Next week. Next week. We'll be
have
back.
to come back next week to hear more. So,
okay.
Great. So, you know, we've got just a couple moments left. Ellen, anything to wrap up?
No, but I want you to tell us what we're going to see on the Billy Joel show.
Oh, well, fantastic. Well, we filmed the show a couple weeks ago, and by we, I want to be very clear that I wasn't in the room on that one, and really all of the credit belongs to Steve Cohen, who has been Billy's longtime creative director and production designer. We were really blessed to have been, over this last year, making a bunch of content for Billy for the stadium shows, and that have also now showed up in the residency. And it's just an unbelievable honor to have been involved in that. But yeah, the show, the 100th show, happened a couple weeks ago at Madison Square Garden. It was filmed with a massive multicam shoot, like truly one of the biggest multicam shoots I've ever seen. And Steve has been busily in post-production, and I've been on the phone with him a lot, talking about what's happening over there. So this Sunday, April 14th, it will be streaming on CBS. So it'll also be it'll be streaming on Paramount Plus after Sunday.
I can't wait.
Fantastic.
Yes. All right. Well, we are going to be back next week with another one of these Zone 1s. So glad that everybody that you've joined us. And we are glad to be back. So we will see you next week. Thanks for tuning in.